Welcome to the Atomic Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Osborn. And on this podcast, we interview successful business owners for them to share atomic, impactful lessons they've learned throughout the course of their businesses and share them with us that we can all learn and grow together. As always, the show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects. We use this method to book 26 qualified leads and sales calls in 10 days without any ad spend, outreach, endless social media posting, or any of the old, ineffective traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. But on today's show, I'm very excited to have Jeff Villwock. He's the owner of Acquisitions Professor, where he's providing M&A coaching to people that are looking to acquire or merge businesses. I was just having a little chat with him. Sounds very exciting. But Jeff, thanks so much for being on the show today. And I want to start off by asking you a question that I always love to start off with. And I'm very curious about your answer to this because of just hearing already the stuff that we were talking about beforehand before we started recording here. But if you were somehow able to go back in time and to when you started your first business, but knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in the first 12 months?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I'd say the best way to answer that is I've started many businesses from scratch. I will never do that again. I
Okay.
will never, ever, ever, ever do that again. And 90% of all businesses that are started fail in the first year. So there's no reason to do that. Go out and find a good business that's already cash flowing, acquire it. I mean, I did that back in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. That was fun. And we had, on day one, I had a salary, I had health care, I had all the stuff, 401ks,
Mm,
that stuff that even if you were successful in starting a business, if you were one of the 10%, okay, it would probably take you 5 years to get there. I got there as soon as the deal closed. So, yeah, and that's why I'm doing M&A today and working with, people that want to get into actually owning a business. Don't start it, buy it.
yeah. Yeah. I love this idea. Um, it's something that I've been curious about myself actually for a while around on how to acquire businesses and stuff. So, what's some of the biggest challenges? Because some people may go, okay, Jeff, the idea of that sounds amazing, but where do I get the capital? Can anyone just get in and do this? Like, or do I need to like build up my own business first, be able to get some capital and invest? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges or stumbling blocks or hurdles that people often encounter when they're entering in this idea of just acquiring a business instead of trying to start something from scratch?
Yeah, good question. First in the United States, the Small Business um, Association (SBA) has a program. It's called the 7A program. They'll loan you up to $5 million. Now, the deal is you've got to come up with 5% of the capital stack, or call it 5% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $2 million business, you need to come up with 100,000 in cash. All right,
Yeah.
but outside of that, SBA will fund the balance. So the funding part of it has been made easy. Easy is being a relative term with the
Yeah.
SBA. They've got all sorts of rules, but if you follow the rules, you can get the deal done. The biggest challenge in getting deals done is often that small businesses generally are not run very well. And so as you get into your due diligence and you're looking at their accounting and you're looking at their business concentrations and you're looking at all the things in the business, often, the whole deal will fall apart because
Mhm.
they told you that they had $300,000 a year in earnings. And you get in there and you figure out, oops, nope, they're losing money. And it's just horrible accounting and it happens all the time. So that's the biggest hurdle to get past.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just going through and finding a deal that actually works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so for instance, last year I signed 7 letters of intent. 7. None of them closed.
Mm.
Okay, one of them didn't close because the seller decided not to sell it anymore. That sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one closed because they lost their key physician and key sales guy as we were going through due diligence and starting to document the deal. Actually, we were that far along. And so 2 out of those 7 died for reasons that had nothing to do with due diligence. And the others died because of due diligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, when people are looking to maybe get into that acquisition side of things, um, just roughly, I know this is kind of a how long is a piece of string type question, but how many businesses do people need to kind of look at before they find a business that was actually passes all the due diligence and things like that to close?
Yeah, obviously you can go one for one, but chances are you're going to be looking at 10 or 20 businesses. Now, look, there are millions and millions and millions and millions of businesses ready for sale,
Yeah.
right? The fact is, of all the broker listed businesses, about 80% of those will never sell.
Okay.
Why not? For exactly the reasons we were talking about a second ago,
Yep.
right? And so you've got to look at a lot of businesses to figure out, you know, what's a good one that that you can actually buy or that you
Yeah.
would want to buy. You can buy anything, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest buying something if you thought it was doing 300,000 in earnings and it was actually losing money. Paying them $800,000 or $900,000 to that business is probably not a good idea,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
it is a numbers game, like most things in life.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Well, as you've gone, because you've gone through a lot of things in business, what's one of the biggest challenges that you've faced in business? It could be any area of the business, but what's one of the biggest challenges you've faced, and what's the lessons that you've learned from that?
I think a lot of the challenges have to do once you own a business in the operations. Okay. Because as you're going through the process to buy a business, you'll do as much due diligence as you possibly can. But that's different than on day one walking into the business and now you're responsible for payroll.
Mm, yeah.
You're responsible for what's going on in the warehouse. So, in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, I bought a business doing $35 million in revenue. All right, they had a 30,000 square foot warehouse. We had 35 employees. And so you can do as much due diligence as you want. You don't know what you got truly until you walk in the door and you find out that this person's, been making a lot of money. He's been sitting on his rear end for 5 years, doing absolutely nothing. He needs to go, right? Happen to be the president of the company. So, you learn pretty quickly when you're on board and in the business what's working, what's not working, and if it's not working, how do you fix it?
Yeah.
And most
Yeah.
of the time,
That.
it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. It's simple blocking and tackling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, having said that, and I know you talked about due diligence, but beyond just the normal due diligence, what's one of the biggest pieces of advice that you give people when they're just starting off in looking at this? That you just see people just making the same mistakes over and over and over, and you're like, if
Right,
you would
right.
just stop doing that, do this instead.
You got to start by defining what I call the buy box.
Okay.
What are you really trying to buy? Again, there are millions and millions and millions of businesses for sale. That's nice. What business do you want to buy? Where do you
Mm,
have a real expertise? What are you world class in?
yeah.
And it doesn't need to be an industry, but you got to narrow it down. So, in my case, I mean, I was one of the top 5 healthcare analysts in the United States, according to the Wall Street Journal. I know healthcare. Guess what business I'm looking at? I'm looking at healthcare. Do I want an air conditioning business, a heating business, a roofing business? Great businesses. I know a ton of people going after those home service type businesses. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Mm.
I mean, the only thing I know about plumbing is though I got a problem, I'm picking up my phone, I'm calling my plumber.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I wouldn't even attempt to do it myself, much less buy a company that does that because I know nothing about it.
Mm.
But in healthcare services, I've got a competitive advantage because I know so much about healthcare services.
Yeah.
And so find, where you have your unique niche. That's where you want to look. Even if it's a very narrow niche, that's where you want to look.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah, really, really good. Well, looking over the next, let's say 2 to 3 years of your own business, what's your own goal? I know you've said you had some letters of intent that you sent out last year. Like, what's your overall goal with where you're wanting to achieve things in your own business?
Yeah, I'm looking at building a sizable healthcare business, and looking for the initial platform company. So I'm bidding on another company today, that's doing a few $1 million in revenue, nicely profitable, and and the owner wants to exit and go do other things. So the idea is first buy that business, figure out what needs to be fixed, fix it, add product lines that make sense for that business, add additional services, and then go out and find the next one. So 6 to 12 months after I buy the first one, I want to buy the second one.
Mm.
All right. It'll probably be in the same state, but not necessarily in the same zip code.
Mhm.
And you start creating value as you're growing a business, using that value you've created to buy the next one, grow those businesses, use the value you've created to buy the next one, and and ultimately, get to a company that's doing $50 million or more in revenue.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll give you a quick example. There's one business that was actually not in healthcare, interestingly enough, but it was right down the street from me. I knew the owner. He wanted to sell it to me. And, and the idea was he knew 7 other owners of the same industry who were also in their 60s, 70s, and 80s that wanted to exit. Total revenue of those 8 companies, $160 million.
Wow.
Right. And if I could buy his and get him to be a shareholder, he would open me up to all those other businesses. And so we could build $100 million business in probably 3 or 4 years. That would have been
Wow.
very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said would have been cool. Did that end up happening or talks or?
Now, one of the SBA rules is that they also want you to know something about the business that you're getting into. Yeah, this happened to be in retailing.
Okay.
Outside of my being a consumer, I don't know. I've never run a retail business, right?
Yeah.
And so the SBA said no, they wouldn't fund it.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. But again, just goes to show that the potential of what is out there is absolutely immense if you just have an idea of what you're doing, speaking to enough businesses, learning that it's a trade, a skill around it, which is really amazing.
right, and there's no reason, look, there are certain people that are cut out to run one business. Okay, you're happy, you're making enough money, no worries, don't mess it up, right? And that's great. That's perfect. I'm just not one of those guys. I want to buy a business, make sure I've got the right people doing the right thing, so I'm not in that business day to day.
Hmm.
And once I can make that transition, which shouldn't take longer than 6 months, then I'm on looking for the next thing to bolt onto this to make a bigger company. And at some point, we might commonly brand. Let's say I've done 3 acquisitions. We might, find a brand that I really like within those 3 acquisitions, and we rebrand the other 2.
Hmm.
You're
Yep.
also going to find new talent in the company you're acquiring.
Yeah.
I might find the future CEO of my $50 million company in a $5 million acquisition that I do. Never know.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's all sorts of ways that people can participate, whether it's simply buying one company, take care of your family, take care of the employees, take care of the legacy of the business, which is generally very important to a seller. And that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think it's great, like where you're wanting to go with the business as well. Well, Jeff, for people that are wanting to get in touch with you, learn more about what you do or how you can help them, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is probably email. Okay, my name's on the screen there.
Yep.
Write that down, and then my email. This is very creative, by the way. It's Jeff at Jeff Villwock, no spaces, .com.
There you go. Very, very, very easy to do. So I definitely recommend anyone that is interested in anything that Jeff just said, definitely reach out to him. You can tell he's got years and years of experience around this and can help you out. So, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom and experience in just decades of business that you've been in. I really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you so much. And
Jason, so glad to do it. Anytime.
yeah, yeah, it was great. It was great. Thank you so much. And as a reminder to everyone listening, the show is sponsored by the LinkedIn Reverse Podcast Method, the new way established businesses are creating a reliable acquisition channel of conversations with their ideal prospects that doesn't rely on any of the old traditional marketing methods that everybody hates. To find out more, direct message me on LinkedIn to have a chat. That's Jason A. Osborn on LinkedIn. The link to that will be in the show notes below. And until next episode, stay inspired.